And welcome back. Hour number 2, Sightings on the Radio. One of the topics we cover here from time to time is the issue of government cover-up, and we're going to take a close look at that at the highest level of research tonight with a gentleman I've known for some time now, David Icke. He is quite a fellow. Of all the extraordinary guests I've ever had in the program, nobody has created more of a reaction from our listeners than probably England's David Icke. He is, of course, very articulate, eloquent, personable, charming, sophisticated, and most informatively, I would say, well, he's fascinating. One of the most mysterious aspects of our society, of course, as many of you would agree, I think, is the control and conditioning of people through the mass media. We've been talking about that a bit tonight already, and many other means as well. Few of us really understand how that is done. The control of people is exerted through the entire gamut of our social fabric, from the money game to mass media entertainment, from TV to the movies. David Icke, spelled I-C-K-E, in case you're wondering, is a former BBC correspondent, an author, and a lecturer, and he is back again in the U.S. after a series of seminars promoting his publications, his books, most notably and most recently entitled And the Truth Shall Set You Free, already tagged by more than a few reviewers as maybe the most explosive book of the 20th century. Hello, David Icke. Are you there?
Hello, Jeff.
How are you?
I'm well. After an introduction like that, I think I'll quit while I'm ahead, you know.
Well, okay. We'll see you next time. Where have you been?
Oh, my goodness, everywhere. Since the turn of the year, I've been in 8 countries. I've come into America via Iceland. I'm sort of getting everywhere these days, and it is fascinating to see whatever country I go into, no matter what the culture is or the background is. 2 things are happening. First of all, there is a spiritual awakening going on, not a religious awakening, but a spiritual awakening. People are beginning to open their eyes and their minds to the greater picture of who they are and the nature of life itself. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's happening is that people are beginning to open their minds to maybe the world is not quite what we're led to believe by the mantra messages that pound out at us all the time, giving us a very narrow, and I would suggest a very flawed and distorted view of what's actually happening in the world.
These mantra messages that come at us all the time can take the form of advertising, jingles, to popular music. They are literally wrote after a period of time. They're memorized involuntarily by most people. They're in there, and they influence people in ways that the average person would never figure out.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting here in Atlanta, where I'm talking at 2 almost simultaneous conferences here. One is about mind control and satanic ritual abuse, which people have suffered, and the 2 go together because trauma is a tremendous form of mind control, including on a mass scale. It's been shown very clearly that a traumatized mind is much more open to suggestion, for instance. So when we have horrendous mass traumatizing events like Oklahoma or what we had in Scotland at Dunblane, when the guy went in the school with a gun, that really does traumatize the mass consciousness and makes them more open to suggestion. And what's interesting that you can observe, actually, Jeff, is that it doesn't matter if you're looking at, what we're looking at here, we're talking about mind control and emotional manipulation, and that's not an exaggeration. What is mind control? It is getting someone to think and therefore behave the way you want them to. Now, under that criteria, virtually everyone on the planet's mind controlled. Right. And if you look at the way it's done, I've done a hell of a lot of research in the last year into individual mind control and stuff, and that's continuing here, where I'm not only talking but listening very intently to what other people are saying and what people have experienced. But if you look at what actually happens, you look at MK Ultra and other mind control projects around the world in the last few decades, and you look at the basis of what happened. You individually mind control someone by wiping them clean of their sense of individuality, their sense of self, their sense of uniqueness, their sense of filtering, their sense of questioning, their sense of coming to their truth. You want them to come to your version of reality. You then replace that blank sheet of paper, if you like, with the personality that you want, which is a reactive personality, which will react to certain stimuli. As soon as you provide that, the reaction will be exactly as planned. You go to the next level, and you look at what they do when you go into the military all over the world. What they're doing from day one is seeking to wipe you clean of your sense of self, your sense of individuality, your sense of questioning, your sense of uniqueness, your sense of coming to your truth. They want a yes sir personality who will just start shooting at people they've never met and have done nothing to them because some guy in a peak cap shouts, shoot. And then you go to the mass level, and exactly the same is happening. We are being conditioned from birth to give up our right to think for ourselves, to come to our own conclusions, to express our uniqueness, and to conform to a herd mentality, which basically is a reactive mentality. If you look at some of the mass mind controlling techniques and emotional manipulation techniques, you're actually looking at stimuli which are designed to get a distinct reaction. And this happens all the time. They know if they can get you angry, if they can get you resentful, if they can get you feel guilty, they got you, because you're going to react to events or statements or things that happen in the world which they're setting up in the way that they want you to, because of course this is now a science, the manipulation of the mass consciousness. This organization in London called the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, which links into Stanford and other places around the world, where there's literally just looking at how the mass consciousness will react in certain circumstances, so they know that if that stimuli will get that reaction, when we need that reaction, we'll just put that stimuli. It becomes a very, cause and effect thing.
We used to call it brainwashing. You know, you talk all the time on this program and wherever you speak about our sense of uniqueness, our sense of filtering, our sense of individual expression being maybe the most important thing we have as individuals, and that's the number one target of mass merchandisers, marketing, advertising, whether they're trying to condition people to buy candy bars, buy a specific soft drink, or vote for a certain candidate. It's the same exact technique, and it's always struck me as rather sad that even in high schools or even junior highs or elementary schools, basic human motivation is not being taught. I guess that would tend to let the cat out of the bag, though.
Yeah, and I think, we're actually at the heart here of how this planet is controlled by a few people, because it has to be done through the mind and the emotions, because you can't do it physically. It's impossible. There's too many people. And if you look at it, what's happened is that we've actually out-sheeped the sheep now. We laugh at sheep when they follow the one in front, and then they succumb to the fear of the sheepdog and stuff like that. We've actually gone one step further than the sheep herd, because we've dispensed with the sheepdog. We police each other. This means that all you have to do to set the foundations of running the entire planet in terms of its direction is to be able to control via the education system, or what passes for it, and the mantra messages through the media, and therefore on through that to peer pressure, where one conditioned group imposes its conditioning on other groups because it's become a crime to be different. And this sets the limits of normal thought, behavior, and what have you in the world. And because most people just follow the norms, like sheep following the one in front, the bar mentality, and others who question the norms but are terrified of saying so because they fear the reaction of people around them, that combination of the bar mentality, which accounts for the majority of sheep, and the fear mentality, which accounts for the minority that don't immediately conform, are exactly the two states of being that control the mass consciousness and turn 5 billion unique aspects of infinity into a two-legged, bewildered herd, which is what we've become. And then, of course, you go one step further and you ask who polices the herd? Well, the herd polices itself, because in every area of our lives we're talking about, if you're different, then you are inviting ridicule and condemnation for that what is now a crime.
You know, all you have to do, David, is go to any elementary school and watch quietly, and you'll see it at work. If one child acts a little differently, he or she becomes the object of ridicule and teasing instantly.
Exactly. Because it is the herd mentality, and many teachers and stuff in the education community have not got a clue that they're actually not teachers but indoctrinators. I spoke in Australia earlier this year, and I'm standing in this lecture theatre in Melbourne waiting to start, and I'm just sort of pondering and stuff, and became very obvious. I just looked at the scene. In front of me was a bank of people sitting in the seats and the desks to write their stuff down. And I'm looking at a free energy machine called education, which just indoctrinates one generation with the nonsenses of the previous one.
Yeah, let me ask you to hold it right there, David, if you will. We have to take our first break, and we'll come right back and pick it up right there with my guest tonight for the second 2 hours of Sightings on the Radio, Mr. David Icke. I'm Jeff Rense, and this is the Premier Radio Network. Back, and we're talking with David Icke, who is in Atlanta tonight, a globetrotter if there ever was one. David, you were into a story about watching people and in Australia down in Melbourne. Please go ahead with that.
Yeah, I was sort of standing in front of this assembled group, and it hit me that I was looking at a free machine, an indoctrination machine, because about, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a day, someone would walk in front of those people, students, in that lecture theater. And how many lecture theaters are there in the world? Millions and millions and millions, and this happens in all of them every day. And the person standing there is a professor of something or other, who has become a professor because he spent his entire career telling the system what it wanted to hear, otherwise he wouldn't have progressed to become one. He then gives the assembled students of the next generation what he has been indoctrinated to tell them. And they write it all down, and if they don't tell the exam paper what he's told them, then they don't pass and progress within the system either. And then the whole thing goes into the next generation, and so on and so forth. So basically, complete nonsenses, and my goodness me, not least in the area of history are we taught total bunkum, just gets passed on from generation to generation, because the pressure is, tell the system what it wants to hear, or the system will kick you out. And, you know, my son, he's 15 back in England, and he has trouble with the teachers at his school because he will not be indoctrinated. And he does terrible things like ask them questions and ask them to justify what they're telling him he should believe. And a few weeks ago, I just sent a little note saying why he'd been away one afternoon. And I said, well, maybe it might have been good for him to get away from being indoctrinated and told what to wear and what to think. Because in this school, they sent round a letter to parents saying that from next term, boys should not come to school with shirts that have 2 pockets in them. They must only have 1. I mean, talk about turning out clones, the next generation. Yeah. And I mentioned in this letter that, you know, I thought maybe an afternoon off from being brainwashed might be a beneficial thing for him. And the teacher came on the phone the next day and then talked to my wife. Unfortunately, I wasn't there. And completely aghast that anyone should think that indoctrination's going on. And 20 minutes later, after she'd finished explaining how the education system works to a teacher, he realized that actually indoctrination was going on, and he hadn't even thought about it.
Well, you made a small chip there.
But what I'm saying there, Jeff, the point I'm making is that most people who are serving this system of indoctrination have no idea they're doing it.
They're part of the machine, and they don't see it.
Yeah.
They're standing right in the middle of it. The issue of peer pressure, herd mentality, honestly, in the last couple of years, I have seen some things that are amazing to me. What we're seeing now is a syndrome of almost mass mutilation. I'm talking about the piercing of the human body, nose, tongues, lips, other areas that you can't see unless you're at the beach, and then areas you can't see even then. If I see any more people open their mouth with 3 or 4 studs in their tongue, I'm going to just roll out of here. It's getting to the point now where these people are absolutely doing everything possible short of cutting off an ear.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going, but it's that, tattoos, and then they also have something called branding, which is actually the searing of the skin. So where is this coming from, this self-degradation aspect?
Well, I think there's a lot of things going on which even people who've researched into mind control and manipulation don't really appreciate. You really got to go back into ancient history and pick this whole stream of control up. And I've done a heck of a lot of research in the last year on this, and I'm just about to start writing a book telling the story from ancient times right up to the present day. And you can actually chart indeed, right back to the 1300s, and a group called the Knights Templar at the time of the Crusades and stuff. You can chart this controlling force back quite comfortably to that point, and increasingly beyond that. And basically what you find is that there has always been a level of knowledge which has been held by the few and kept out of the public arena. Years ago, centuries ago, it was maps of the world, for instance, one of the things that people didn't realize existed. As I show in my books, and I'll show in greater detail in this one, Christopher Columbus wasn't looking for India and then tripped over and found the Americas. He knew it was here. He was connected to something called the Knights of Christ. His father-in-law was a member of this secret society in Portugal, and which was based in Portugal. And the Knights of Christ were just another name for the Knights Templar, who had been purged in France in 1307 by the King of France. By that time, they rivaled the Roman Church for wealth and influence, which history has kind of written them out. They were fantastically powerful, and indeed the banking system we have today is pretty much come from their structure. You also then follow another group of Templars who got out of France, and they went up to Scotland, and re-emerged as the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which today pervades the banking system, the political system, the business system of the world, etc. So right back there was knowledge held that was not available in the public arena, and this goes back to ancient times, and some of this knowledge relates to mind control, knowledge of what consciousness is, because the ancients knew far more than we ever believe. And incidentally, I was in a church up in Scotland a few weeks ago, earlier this month, called Rosslyn Chapel, and which was actually built by the Sinclair family, which became the Scottish Sinclair family, a family that were at the heart of this Knights Templar secret society. And you'll see in the stonework, and I saw it myself, things like sweet corn plants and cactus plants that were only found in America, and that church and that stonework was done considerably before Columbus left to, quote, find the Americas. So there's so much in history alone that we don't know about. This knowledge has obviously been passed on through the upper levels of the secret society network, while at the same time, through this period of history we're looking at, this same force has created institutions in the public arena, like the Roman Church and various other institutions, to take the knowledge out. And if you look at what happened with the British Empire and such like, and Britain and particularly Germany and London are at the heart of this global manipulation on a secret society level. When the European people came to America, they basically destroyed, as it was, the Native American culture. They took that knowledge out of wide circulation. When the Spanish went to Central and South America, they did exactly the same. When the British went to Australia and New Zealand, they did the same. When the Europeans went to Africa, they did the same. Knowledge of many things was taken out of circulation, and as it went out of circulation more and more, the people at the top of the pyramid hoarded that knowledge, and it significantly, as I said earlier, it significantly applies to the nature of consciousness, how to manipulate it, what it is, etc., etc.
Are we at an all-time low, David, in terms of accessible knowledge vis-a-vis the mass of humanity, even though we have such things as the Internet now beginning to turn that around? But in general, when you are at the mercy of the mass media in this country, is our knowledge base really pretty low?
Well, I think it's desperately low, but improving the more that people stand up and speak out, which is happening more and more now, and that's fantastic. And people's minds are becoming more open, not the majority yet, but more are becoming more open to other things, to try to explain the apparently unexplainable things that go on in the world. But I think that, you see, that all over, one side is played off against another. There is, in the Christian world, this idea that there is such a thing as good and bad knowledge. So something that is different to the norm is considered the occult, it's the devil, when it's just the negative use of knowledge. Knowledge can be used positively or negatively, and we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater here, I think, with some of this condemnation of knowledge, which is actually the way out of here.
Yeah, indeed. All right, David Icke, the guest. We'll be right back and talk with David about many things. When you want to call in and talk to him, 1-800-745-6655 is the number here. And the call, as always, is on us. We'll be right back. David, in our first hour, we had a chat with Susan Michaels, and a gentleman called in and just couldn't believe there was any kind of a conspiracy. In the main, I'm not belittling that. A lot of people agree with him that there could not be a conspiracy in the mainstream media to keep the UFO issue hidden and to actually foment, perpetrate, and underwrite a 50-year cover-up. He said it would be too big of a secret to keep. I think the average person doesn't understand that the government, we'll put that in quotes, is perfectly capable of keeping secrets over long periods of time, and the evidence to sustain that concept is overwhelming.
Well, I think I heard someone say today, actually, at one of these conferences, that the governments don't have to keep big secrets, because big secrets keep themselves. They have to keep the little secrets. The reason the big secrets keep themselves is because if you can condition into someone a certain view of reality, which is light years away from the truth, if the truth actually does come out, no one believes it because it's so far from the conditioned view of reality that you've taken on. So big lies, big secrets, they tend to take care of themselves because no one believes them. Oh, no, mate, that's too far-fetched. Mm-hmm. I mean, the idea of the presidents of the United States and leading politicians in Britain are abusing mind-controlled children as young as 1, 2, 3. I mean, that is so far from people's reality. And more than that, so far from people's desire to accept it, because it says so much about the world and what have you, that people go into denial about it. So the big secrets keep themselves. I have came across, actually, talking about the UFO thing, an interesting quote which was given to me in England before I came out here. I've not had a chance to check it, but certainly the basis of it seems certainly plausible to me in my research. A quote by Henry Kissinger, which a Swiss delegate was supposed to have written down at the Bilderberg meeting, this secret, semi-secret organization.
No, I know this quote. It's if it's true, it's a powerhouse.
Yeah, about the UN troops and stuff. You got that one?
Please do it if you have it.
Well, I will. I've got it here. But I think the point that I've made a number of times when we've talked to each other, Jeff, and I think it's a vital one to keep ramming home, is this idea of problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, get the reaction, offer the solution. And I must say, I have started to look at this UFO thing. I mean, I don't have a problem with the existence of extraterrestrials. I mean, the idea that, we're the only species that exist is so ludicrous. I mean, can't wake me up, mother. Anyone can try to get us to believe that. But I think the whole subject can be manipulated, especially as we've got our pyramid again with knowledge at the top and the people in ignorance of that knowledge in the rest of the pyramid. And that particularly applies to the UFO thing. And I have started to look at suddenly there's all this suppression of stuff about UFOs and extraterrestrials and what have you. And yet now, suddenly, through Hollywood and other mass audience programs, and we've had the same prime time in Britain recently, this whole UFO thing starts to come out. And a lot of it has been fear-based. And, Hollywood is one of the greatest forms of global mind manipulation. I mean, you ask a lot of people in the world for their version of history and various historical events, and they'll give you Hollywood's version. I mean, I remember during the 50s and 60s when I was a kid, we used to have cowboy and Indians films on the telly every Sunday, and it indoctrinated people to a totally misrepresented view of actually what happened in that period.
I've made that point before, that Hollywood is by and large responsible for much of the commonly held views of American history. Hollywood basically invented American history.
Absolutely. And what we've got here is a quote from Henry Kissinger that is appearing to be using this UFO, this fear of an extraterrestrial invasion, etc., as a problem, reaction, solution scenario. You get the problem, even if it's a manufactured one like this, you get the reaction, something must be done, and if you can get the fear reaction, then you've really got people, and then you offer the solution. And as I've talked about and written about many times, as other people too, one of the parts of the agenda that is unfolding is the creation of a centralized world army under central control. And the Kissinger quote says this: "Today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government." And it's a classic problem, reaction, solution scenario, this one. And of course, back in the 60s, there was a report called the Report from Iron Mountain, which was reported about 1966, it is said. And it was 15 experts in various fields that were asked to produce a report on how to centralize control and manipulate the mass population without further recourse to wars, which is how it had been done up to that point. And two of the things they suggested was, one, a threat to the global environment, global problem, global reaction, which allows you to offer your global solution. From 1968, 2 years after that report apparently was finished, came the Club of Rome, which is an organization set up by the very people who are running this agenda. And we had the environmental thing all the way through the last 20 years, which has actually used problem, reaction, solution to get pan-global laws and what have you, and the fear of the environment. Now, I'm not saying there's not an environmental problem. My question is, why are the people who are funding and fronting often the major global environmental reports and events like the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, why are they the same people that are quite demonstrably dismantling the world's ecology? And, and another one of the report from Iron Mountain's suggestions was, back in the 60s now, a threat from an extraterrestrial force. And I think we could be seeing that scenario unfolding here as this myth is created that we should be terrified of an extraterrestrial invasion, which will lead us to give all our power away to a world war cabinet and a global army to, exactly as that Kissinger's quote says, give our power away in fear of what will happen.
Yeah, that's a remarkable quote. Also, the global financial structure will be quickly retooled to underwrite one basic financial currency, and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
This is all coming. The debit card has now taken charge and is rivaling the credit card in this country. Cashless society. It's not necessarily. It's almost a natural evolution when you consider the history of this world for the last 2,000 years. And as you've pointed out so many times, the basic same people or same power structure is in place today as it was 500 to 1,000 years, even longer ago.
Exactly, and when people don't do that research, I understand it. They think, oh, come on. But you can chart it back. I mean, you know, it is there to be seen. And I think that what's happening now is that this awakening that's going on around the world, and people are opening their eyes more and more, I think this agenda is being pressed forward quicker and quicker.
A lot of people agree with that, David. There is a rush underway now to get it in place, to create the problem with as much fear as possible, as quickly as possible. Some people are suggesting it may be a combination of induced earth changes. Environmental catastrophe could easily be fomented in the media. It's bad enough, but I mean, they could goose it up. And then you introduce with holograms or hardware that we probably have had for a number of years, craft, ET-looking craft. It would be so easy to stampede people, it's not even funny.
And if anyone's out there listening to this that thinks what you've just said is ludicrous, I would refer them to War of the Worlds, 1938, I think it was, Orson Welles, standing in a radio studio claiming to be at the scene of a Martian landing. I think it was in New Jersey. And all hell broke loose where he was supposed to be but wasn't. And there's no doubt in my mind anyway, having talked to lots of people in various parts of the U.S. Over the last year or so, that the government do have what we call flying saucer technology.
Oh, and we've had guests on the program, David, very recently that say we've had it for 30 years.
I agree with that.
Yeah, what we have now is ultra advanced and so forth, and amazing quotes are popping up. We live in a wild time, no doubt. David Icke, the guest, will be right back in just a couple of minutes here at Sightings on the Radio. And we're back. It's my pleasure to be speaking to a friend of some duration, one of the most provocative people I've ever met, David Icke, author of many books, including his most recent bestseller, And the Truth Shall Set You Free. We'll give you the number to order that book and find out about David's other products here, his other books, in just a few minutes. Jim is on the line now, calling in from Everett, Seattle, listening in on KRKO. Jim, you're on the air with David Icke. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks very much, and David, too. Question about the problem reaction solution scenario that you just mentioned, David. A lot of talk about these created events that are coming or prophesized through, namely remote viewing. And there's a gentleman that has talked about a problem in North and South Korea, a probable or possible war. I noticed the network news are talking about that. And this guy, I don't know if you want me to mention his name or not, but
go ahead, Jim, if he doesn't mind.
James, prominent remote viewer, talks about the first use of a limited nuclear device in the North Korea theater as a result to spread mayhem and terror and so forth. And I just wondered if that fits into the scenario that David talks about.
It certainly does, and I've been talking to someone, I can't say who it is at the moment, but someone who would be aware of things that are going on in the Middle East, and he is absolutely convinced that there is a quote, terrorist scenario there, which will involve some kind of explosion, probably at the mosque on Temple Mount, of course, which is held sacred by the Muslims, but sacred by many other religions too. The supposed site of Solomon's Temple and Herod's Temple and what have you. And of course, if something like that happened and it was put at the hands of the Israelis, then there would be a bloodbath in the Middle East beyond words, and that would draw in Europe. Now, we've already set the precedent here, problem, reaction, solution. We've gone from a UN peacekeeping operation into a NATO-led peacekeeping operation, 60,000-strong world army in Bosnia. And as I've pointed out in talks with Jeff before, if you look at the main peace negotiators in Bosnia from the start to the end of that conflict, and I don't think we've seen the end of it yet myself, you're looking at whether they're UN or European Union appointed people. They are members of the same organizations, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London. And there's nothing that changes society more than a war, and there's nothing that creates fear more than a war. So I think this Korean thing certainly fits in. And I think that the China card could well be played, because for a long time we had the Cold War. And what was kind of funny is that I've just come down from speaking in Iceland, and I actually spoke in Reykjavik right next to the house where Reagan and Gorbachev met. You remember they talked about the Armstrong? Well, I tell you what I found fascinating, because these people work with these energies, and they know about the Earth energy grid. They know about astrological energies. They know this stuff. They never meet anywhere, in any place, at any time, unless it all works out that way. And things like Freemasonic lodges are actually built on vortex points on the Earth's grid and ley line points. And I'm speaking at this hall in Reykjavik, and on one side of the hall is the main Masonic temple for Iceland, and 30 seconds walk away on the other side is the house where Reagan and Gorbachev met. This whole Cold War thing was actually a setup to create fear on both sides. And I've talked to some people who actually were staggered to realize on the peripheries of the, nothing like the top of the pyramid of the intelligence community, but enough to be in on this sort of stuff, that technological transfers were going on through the Cold War from America to the Soviet Union to keep the parity, so that the justification for more arms spending and fear was there. And of course then came the point in this agenda unfolding where NATO and the European Union were due in this agenda to start encompassing the countries of the former Soviet Union. So of course we couldn't have the evil empire anymore, and that was part of what Reykjavik was about. We had to produced Gorbachev, a close associate of David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger, to start smiling a bit and become the first Russian leader who didn't look like he'd just come back from a funeral. And everyone sort of got comfortable, and then the Berlin Wall came down, and suddenly the whole evil empire was dismantled very, very quickly. And then what has happened? NATO and the European Union are now talking about encompassing those countries, which basically leaves one major power left that could be used as the Soviet Union was used before, and that's China. And I think that and the fear of the Muslim world, which is an old one that's been predicted, actually could be played. Because I think what Jeff has said is absolutely right, in that we're coming now to a point in this agenda where certain things need to happen. People are waking up. The challenge is coming in to all this suppressed knowledge and actually the agenda unfolding of what it is. And I think everything's going to be thrown in the next few years to create chaos and fear, which will leave people in a position where they'll just say something must be done to stop this, and they'll accept any solution. And that will be world army, world central bank, world currency, world government, and microchip population. And that's the agenda.
Coming up on a break, Jim, if you want to hang on, we'll give you another shot here right after this. Sure, 3-minute timeout here at Sightings on the Radio. My guest, David Icke, and we'll be right back in just a couple of moments, so stay with us. Okay, we're back. Let's go back up to Jim in Seattle, listening in on KRKO. Go ahead, one more question, Jim, if you'd like.
Thank you. David, we just got a few minutes here, and I maybe take time after the break here at 8 o'clock and go on with this question, I hope, if you talk about it. I've heard you speak about the Federal Reserve in the United States and the unique way that it mystifies and hoodwinks the American public, but especially when you talk about, in your unique way, the national debt or the budget debate as being nothing more than fresh air. And if you could elaborate on that at great length, I think the people listening would benefit.
You know, why don't we do this? Let's do that money story. It's a lengthy story, as Jim said. We want to start on it now, but you've got some great lines, David. And that's really the mechanism by which this whole thing is held together and manipulated. It's money and the fact that the average individual needs it.
Yeah, I tell you, we go back to what we were talking about teachers earlier. I spoke in Vancouver earlier this year, and when I was talking about this, I noticed one guy got up and left at the back of the theater. And after I was finished, the guy who put the whole meeting on, he said, "You upset a friend of mine." I said, "Oh, really? What?" He said, when you walked out, when you were talking about the money and how money didn't exist and what a great con it was, and that we're actually paying interest on fresh air, he walked out because he said it doesn't work like that. And I said, "Well, how does it work?" And he couldn't really tell me. He says, "But I'll tell you what that guy does for a living. He's an economist. He's advising people on the economy and money and et cetera in Vancouver every day, and he doesn't know how money's created." We're told, first of all, that governments print money. That's the thing we're led to believe. Well, they don't. Money's created in a very simple way. It's by private banks owned by the same people, issuing non-existent money called credit. And so you go to a bank and they'll give you a loan, say $100,000. But all they do at that point is not print any paper or mint any coins or move any precious metals a single inch. They just type into your account $100,000. That's all they do. And from that moment on, you're paying interest on $100,000. That is just figures on a screen. So what we've actually done is give complete control over the creation of money to private banks, which, as I show and others have shown, are actually owned and controlled by the same people. Now, if you look, what is the difference between a boom and a bust? It's one thing. During a boom, there's abundance, jobs, etc. That's when there is enough units of exchange in circulation to allow economic activity to take place that allows that to happen. When we have a bust, a depression, the only difference between that and a boom is the number of units of exchange in circulation is far less. Therefore, there's not enough money to go around to exchange for goods and services and create that economic activity. The people who decide how many units of exchange are in circulation or not. In other words, whether we have a boom or a bust are those banks that decide if they're going to let lots of loans go at low interest or not many loans go at high interest. And of course, the Federal Reserve, this European-owned fascist organization, set interest rates in this country. So basically, you have a boom, you get people in debt and all that stuff, and then you have a bust, and you reap all the wealth of all the bankruptcies and what have you, the real wealth, land, buildings, businesses, right. And you get that in exchange for fresh air.
And then you set it up and start all over again. When we continue, when we continue with David Icke, we'll talk about how banks can loan money, and most of you would say, well, banks can't loan more money than they have on deposit, can they? Well, we're going to talk about fractional banking and all of that as we continue here at Sightings on the Radio tonight with England's David Icke. We'll be back after the news. And we are back talking with England's David Icke, whose book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, is considered to be a very dangerous book by some people. We're talking about banking and the whole money game, and it is the biggest and probably oldest game there is. When you go into a bank and ask for a loan and you qualify, whatever qualify means anymore, you're given a certain amount of money. But are you? Are you given anything? No. Simply digits are changed in your bank account, so to speak, or a check is cut to you. Again, all numbers. What are the rules, the alleged rules, David, that a bank has to follow in order to make loans to the public about money on deposit and so forth and assets?
Well, there is virtually none now. I mean, as a rule of thumb, you could say that they have to have 10% of what they loan, but in truth, they often need far less than that. We go back to this whole scenario. I mean, the Knights Templar in the 1300s, they started lending people money that didn't exist and then charging interest on it, going right back that far. And you can go back to Babylon in the ancient world to find the same thing. And it's always been used as a form of control, because if you can get people in debt, you have got them under control. If you can have companies all over the world, and small businesses particularly, having to pay back interest on money that doesn't exist, loans to the bank to keep the businesses going, then you're, for a start, inflating the price of every single product that is sold, because everyone in the production process of that product, from making it to transporting it to marketing it to selling it, is adding extra to their costs to service interest on money that doesn't exist, which they've borrowed. So that combination of people in debt and higher prices than necessary means you're pressuring people to serve your system to earn the money to pay these prices you're inflating and this debt that you're creating. And this is can be seen in America and all over the world at a government level, where fantastic amounts of taxpayers' money every year is going straight into the coffers of the Federal Reserve banks to pay back interest on fresh air while people go hungry and people go homeless. I mean, this is such a con, it's unbelievable. And it's possible because America, like Britain, is a one-party state. If you look at whether the Republicans or whether the Democrats are in, or the Labour or Conservative in Britain, the same agenda keeps unfolding. And this agenda is for the global centralization of power at a very, very complete level. And fundamental to that is control of money, because that controls people's ability to purchase, ability to live their lives. So if you go back to the time of William of Orange in Britain, who was brought over to be King of England by a secret society, among others, called the Orange Order from Holland. And it's the Orange Order, of course, that is very much involved in the conflict and what have you in Northern Ireland to this day. And what William of Orange was brought over to do was to create the Bank of England. And he signed the charter. I think it was in 1694, and this banking system started to motor. And the Federal Reserve, of course, as has been well documented, was actually created by European bankers, not least the House of Rothschild. And what governments can do, because they're the government, is print its own money interest-free and put it into circulation interest-free, so that money takes on its positive aspect, which is as a unit of exchange for exchanging contributions to society. What happens, however, because the people that have controlled the politicians have been the people that own the banks, governments borrow money from private banking cartels and pay interest on it. All this interest, this national debt in America, excuse me, it's fresh air. It doesn't exist. Oh, we must reduce the deficit. There is no deficit. It's fresh air. It's a complete con. And what has happened, of course, is that you just look at the presidents of the United States as an example. You need cuckoo land amounts of money to run for president. Who provides that money? The people that run the banking and business community, who are the same people. And you get paid by the piper. You dance to his tune when you're in office. And so this legislation has gone on being passed over the last few centuries, which allows banks to lend what they don't have. Very simple example.
How do you phrase it, David? Never did? You got a great line.
What's that?
The money line. Never did exist, doesn't now?
Oh, yeah. We are up to our necks in debt on money that has never, does not, and will never exist. And if anyone believes that a few people can't control the world, then they should just look at the power we've given to these bankers over control of our lives. So we're in a situation where the politicians have passed legislation which allows banks to lend fresh air, money they don't have, and get rewarded for it. And if you look at the way this has unfolded over the years, it means that because of this turkey shoot idea, whereby you create a boom, you get people into debt, you get governments into debt, you get individuals and businesses into debt because people say, oh, it's boom time now. Oh, yeah, well, I'll have a bigger car, a bigger house, we'll have 2 holidays this year because things are going well. I haven't got the money, but things are going well, so I'll be able to service the debt, so we'll just have another loan. And then businesses say, hey, there's all this kind of economic activity. People want to buy our products. There's lots of money in circulation. So we'll borrow more from the bank to get better plant and machinery, and then we'll be able to increase production. And then at that point, the people who put the money into circulation take it out again. They stop making as many loans. They make sure interest rates go up, and the Federal Reserve, I repeat, has complete control of that. And basically, units of exchange are taken out of circulation. People haven't got the same amount of money to spend. The economic activity falls, the demand for products falls, but those loans that have been taken out in the boom time still have to be serviced. Not only that, the interest rates you're paying on them are now higher, so people go bankrupt, people lose their money, people lose their businesses, and the banks get all that wealth that does exist. Now this boom-bust con, which the economists on the big CNN say, well, this is just this point on the economic cycle, and this is perfectly natural. It's complete manipulation. And it means the real wealth of the world has been sucked to the top of this pyramid, which is why the real wealth of the world is owned by so few people. And so we're in a situation now where we've given complete control over whether we have a boom or a bust to a handful of people who run the global banking system and the global political system and the transnational corporations. And I just say to people, you know, if you think this is all a nonsense and actually money does exist and all that stuff and this is not happening, then you try en masse tomorrow morning going out and taking out of the bank what you theoretically have on deposit. If everyone in America tried to take out tomorrow the money they theoretically have on deposit in the banks, they'd be slamming the doors by 9:30 because they have not got it. And yet that's the debt that we're up to our neck in. And that's what the third world debt is. The third world debt, which is crucifying environmentally and in human terms, what we call the third world, is debt on money that has never, does not, will never exist.
That's right. That may be the most insidious of all the debt structures, what's happening to the third world. I've had people that live in Brazil and are Brazilian tell me that Brazil is not owned by Brazilians anymore. It's owned by transnational corporations. Doris is on the line, calling in from Jacksonville on WJGR. Hi, Doris. How are you? And you're on the air with David Icke.
Hi. I have 3 things I'd like to say, and then I'll get off the husband, okay?
All right.
I believe the media is so powerful and persuasive that they could change the world into a law-abiding and peace-loving world within 5 years through programs that have morals and that show consequences of bad behavior and places glorifying it. And then he was talking about mind control, the masses being led like sheep. Well, a good proof of this is 20 years ago, companies paid people to wear their logo. Well, now the people turn around and they pay the company.
Absolutely. I've just been saying that to my son. I said, what are you doing buying a jumper and paying to publicize someone's product? You know?
It's amazing.
It's incredible.
Good point, Doris. All right, number 3.
And then I'd like to know if David or any of the listeners have ever noticed the bizarre behavior of Bush, the Pope, and Margaret Thatcher, and I believe Ronald Reagan, all around the same time. George Bush, I believe, was in Japan at a dinner, and all of a sudden he acted like he was shot. He almost threw up, and he fell to the floor. That was his bizarre behavior. And then Margaret Thatcher, I believe that she was in a South American country somewhere, and she was there at a luncheon to make a speech. She was at the podium.
Doris, sit tight. Hold on, dear, will you? We have to take a break, and we'll pick that up right there with Margaret Thatcher in South America as we continue here at Sightings on the Radio in just about 3 minutes with my guest, David Icke, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Sightings on the Radio. You can reach Jeff live at 1-800-745-6655.
All right, we are back. Doris, you're halfway through point number 3. Let's finish that up, and then we'll ask you to hang up and listen, and we'll try and respond to these. We have much ground to cover here and just about 40 minutes left to do it. So you talked about George Bush, and then you're talking about Margaret Thatcher.
Right, and she was in South America, and she was standing at the podium, and then all of a sudden her head just went totally straight down and bumped the top of the podium as if she'd been knocked out. And all of a sudden, then she comes straight back up. You know, it was a very bizarre scene, and it should be on the news tape somewhere. It'd be nice if somebody gathered these things together and try to figure out what happened. But also, the Pope, the same thing had happened to him. I think he was in Rome, and he made his speech outside where he usually doesn't. And they said that his was the cause of the flu. They had an excuse for all of it, but it all happened around the same time when Bush was in office, and it certainly is very bizarre, and it has bothered me all this time, and I praise the Lord for your program that helps me get this stuff out of my system, you know, and get other people thinking about it. And thank you.
Thank you, Doris. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. All right, David, let's knock through these 3. Doris is suggesting the media is so powerful and persuasive that it could, should it want to, or should those controlling it want to use it as a tool, make this a much better world in 5 years or less.
Sure. I mean, again, we're back to what I talked about earlier. We're not looking at positive and negative knowledge or positive and negative machinery technology. We're looking at the positive and negative use of it. A microphone or a notebook or a newspaper is not by nature negative. It's how you use it. And the global media can be used to inform people and transform this world by information, because people talk about the Freedom of Information Act and the freedom of information. The information itself is the freedom. If you have got the whole range of information available, you have the ability to make your mind up in a way that you don't if information is restricted, because your vision of possibility, your vision of yourself and all these other perceptions is governed by what we know. So if you can be restricted about what you know, your possibility and perception is going to be restricted. So the media is not positive or negative. It's just the way it's used, and it's used in a highly malevolent and negative way at the moment, and not least because some of the most least informed, disinformed, and non-thinking people that I've ever met, and I was in the profession for a while, are journalists. It's quite staggering, the most incredibly limited vision of life that I come across in the media. The second one we've covered with the logos, I mean, that is a classic. I mean, talk about, I mean, people are going round like billboards, and they're paying for the privilege. I mean, it's
premium
stunning.
prices, yeah. Premium prices to buy something with a logo of the company that made it on it. It's just amazing.
It's just stunning. And the third one, well, that's a whole interesting area. Anyone mentions the name George Bush to me, they press a button and I talk for about 3 hours, because this guy is something else, and still to this day is. But Bush, the Pope, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, they're all operating in this frontman role and front-woman role below the people that really run the show in this upper elite of this pyramid. Although people like Bush are further up than some of the others, because George Bush was born into this manipulation. His father was Prescott Bush, who was one of the people who, through the Harriman organization, funded Adolf Hitler, as I document in my book. Margaret Thatcher started appearing at Bilderberg meetings in the early 70s, just as she came out of nowhere to lead the Conservative Party and then became leader of the British government right the way through the 80s, when she was doing things economically that were exactly the same as what was happening with Ronald Reagan over here. Reagan, another front man, never seen a piece of autocue he didn't read. And then we have the Pope. I mean, again, the popes are front men. I mean, I love seeing the Pope bounce around in that Pope-mobile, surrounded by 4 inches of plexiglass, bulletproof glass. I mean, that's faith in action, isn't it? Yeah. And what happened to the previous guy who lasted 33 days, Pope John Paul I? There was somebody who, it seems to me, had realized that the P2 Freemasonry Lodge and other elite elements in this network were actually running the Vatican Bank, and running it as their own fiefdom. And he wanted to do something about it, and he disappeared from this earth after 33 days. So all these people are front people, and coming to the basic theme of the question, I have no doubt whatsoever that they play with their heads. And if they use mind control on the general population, they use mind control on the military, they use mind control on individuals to create assassins and what have you, are they not going to play with the heads of people who they put up front to represent their interests? Of course they are, and the whole mind control scenario, before we finish the program, might get us into the whole Diana, Princess of Wales scenario, because I think there's a lot to say about that in terms of mind control and what actually happened. Well, they just play with their heads, and I think that the more I look into this, the more the people who are actually the so-called people in positions of power in the world, they are, at least to some extent, mind controlled themselves.
You know, we might as well get into the Diana issue right now and try and move through that one. That's obviously a very pertinent issue to a lot of people. The Internet has been wild with speculation since almost the first moment after the accident.
Yeah.
Muammar Gaddafi is now calling for the assassins of Diana to be turned over to Libya prior to him even considering turning over the alleged bombers of the Lockerbie Pan Am plane disaster. So, I mean, it's really gotten to a big stage, this entire thing. And let's have David Icke's read on it.
Well, first of all, when you look at the Lockerbie background, and I've talked to people in the last 3 weeks who put together an excellent film called The Maltese Cross, which looked at the Lockerbie thing. And the last 2 people on Earth who did the Lockerbie bombing were those 2 guys in Libya. But again, you know, I think Gaddafi and others are jumping on the bandwagon here and trying to use this for their own advantage. And I think it's a time just to not look at certainties in terms of the Diana thing, but certainly look at possibilities which aren't being looked at by the mainstream media. I've talked to a lot of people about this in various areas, and I'll give you a story which completely links into Paris and what I feel at this time very strongly. Actually was what happened. We're back to mind control. Over the last 20 years or so in Britain, a ridiculous number of high-tech scientists working in really above top secret projects, Star Wars and others, have met very strange deaths, very weird suicides. One guy, for instance, just left his dinner halfway through, drove to a place called Bristol where there's a massive suspension bridge over a gorge, and jumped off it. And some very strange things have happened. And I think it's getting on for 30 of these people.
That's
who
right.
Work for Marconi and GEC.
Marconi, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the one guy tied a rope around his neck, tied the other end around a tree in his convertible, and floored it and took off.
That's right. And that was also in Bristol, as I remember.
Yeah,
but
bizarre.
The one that I would pick out in relation to Paris, just to show the possibility here, is that on March the 28th, 1987, there's a guy called David Sands, and was coming to the end of a 3-year high-tech project working for a company called Icke, which is one of the most secretive of the GEC network. And his father had chronic heart trouble and due to stress, and he was starting to talk to his wife and people at work about the fact that he was going to get out of this business because he didn't want to end up like his father. On this day, the Saturday, he told his wife he was going down the gas station to fill the car up, be about 10 minutes. He never came back, or not least he didn't come back for 6 hours, by which time the police are looking for him. His wife's beside herself. And when he came in, she asked the obvious question, "Where have you been?" He said, I had to have a long think. Well, 6 hours is a long think, especially when you've just gone down the gas station. She said of his state that he was very confused, and particularly confused about the length of time he'd been away. And we'll finish the story in a second.
Very good, David.
Relates to the driver in Paris.
Okay, we'll be right back with David Icke in just a couple seconds here at Sightings on the Radio. Okay, we're back. Go ahead, David, please.
Yeah, this guy, he went missing for 6 hours on a Saturday. Came back confused and not knowing how long he'd been away. On the Sunday, he complained of headaches and nausea. And on the Monday morning, he got into his car to drive from his home near Winchester in the south of England to a place called Camberley, to the Eason's place. And he's going the way he went every single day. He's going down a dual carriageway at this point. And for no apparent reason, he turns off, which was not his way to work, up a slip road, foot hard down on the accelerator. He was going at least 80 miles an hour up a slip road, and turned off the road halfway up into a disused cafe building, and blew himself away. There wasn't one skid mark on the road. This guy did not touch the brake. And in his boot, trunk, as you call it here in America, they found 2 very large cans of petrol which exploded on impact, and they had to identify him from his dental records. It's kind of a massive explosion that happened. No one's ever explained why that happened. He had no problems with a very happy marriage. There was nothing to suggest this guy would want to blow himself away. Right. And the more, again, in this conference in Atlanta, just listening to people who are experts in this field of mind control, and the victims too, getting someone to be programmed, he completely wouldn't have any idea that he'd been programmed. That is wiped away. And then it just takes the trigger. It could be a road sign, it could be a word, it could be a sound, it could be anything like that, whatever the trigger they program in there. And this guy would have gone crazy down the road with his foot hard down on the accelerator and turned off the road at the desired point. We really are looking at the ability to, and have been for decades, to have the external control of someone's mind in this way. And talking to people in the intelligence community in Britain, what they were telling me is something that's quite obvious. Is basically when you set up a crash, and they were convinced that that's what had happened.
No doubt.
No doubt at all. And they say you're not going to be sure you're going to kill the person you're after, but you have a reason for them to be killed. In other words, there's been an accident. Mm-hmm. And so you set up a fail-safe mechanism, and you make sure that if they do survive the crash, they don't survive the treatment. And there's so many questions that are still unanswered. In the Scotsman newspaper in Britain, there was an excellent piece of research there looking at why it took so long to get her from the crash site to hospital. And they talked to British doctors and what have you and said, oh, in this circumstance, what do you do? In that circumstance, you get them to hospital as fast as you can. They even said to this investigation established, they even said to the ambulance drivers, don't go more than what we would call 25 miles an hour on the way to hospital. I mean, this is just utterly ludicrous. And she was talking to people early on, it would seem.
Now, I've read that. I have no confirmation. I've read that, and yet when you compare a talking accident victim with the alleged injuries that were fatal to her, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, my view, certainly at this time, and I'm really going to investigate this deeply, is that she survived the crash. Interestingly, here in Atlanta, there's these two conferences running simultaneously, one about mind control, talk about synchronicity, and the other one is about security. And what they have here are cars on display that are, protection cars for people, and these limos they have that have all the extra protection on them.
Right.
There are people here that run businesses looking after the security of well-known people and businessmen and stuff. And I've obviously took the opportunity. I've been going around talking to all these people. To a man, they are absolutely convinced from their perspective of security and looking at the security and what happened in the car and what they're convinced to a man that this was a setup. And I must say, we talk about this awakening and what have you that's going on, and people asking questions more and more. In all the incidents and events I've ever come across and talked about, the ratio of people who are, not just in Britain but around the world, who are simply not buying the official version of this event is higher than I've ever come across in my life. And I think this is an assassination too far, because I don't think this is going to go away. And I think that in the next 18 months to 2 years, revelations are going to blow the mind of people when they realize that there are people willing to do this. Because she was on one level dangerous. And I think Henry Kissinger summed it up, and I think he was talking in code at the time myself. He was talking about Diana, and he was asked about her, and he said to the interviewer, she was politically and diplomatically uncontrollable. And when you're doing that, and you have instant global publicity for anything you do, and you are in your power, and you're starting to pick up and run with issues that are fundamental to this manipulation, then of course that's not the only reason. I think there are other reasons too. But she was a danger to this thing.
Well, that's a very telling statement, and I would not dismiss it lightly at all. Let's go to Spokane, and listening in on KSBN is Judd. You're on the air, Judd, with David Icke.
Hi, Jeff. Actually, it's a follow-up to a question I asked the other day when you had Colonel Prouty on, and I was asking about, is there any way to identify this control system, which David very interestingly seems to be doing now when we're talking about the Freemason practices, etc. But my question this time, is there any organized, I don't want to say resistance, but grouping of people that David might know that are creating some kind of a counterbalance to what we're all beyond assuming is going on here? Is there any type of, because these are only people. Well,
the mechanism you have to look at first, Judd, is obviously the Internet. It's information. Again, I think this is a war of information, as David has made abundantly clear.
Right.
The powers that be suck up the information as well as the money, but primarily they withdraw information and knowledge. And knowledge now is pretty much getting out of the cage, isn't it, David?
Yeah, I see. We talk about this, and we need to, because we need to know what's going on. But I would say to anyone listening to this, there's no reason to be anything but optimistic here, because I'm very, very optimistic about the future. We're at the point of the great change. We're at the point of the apocalypse, and by that I don't mean the end of the world. As I understand it, the original meaning of the word apocalypse is the unveiling, the revealing, and that's the point we're at now. And it's time for people to, well, you can do one of three things. You can run away, you can stand still, or you can run straight at him. And it's time to run straight at him.
That's what I'm saying.
And really step out of this closet, this prison called fear. Because we are multidimensional infinity. We are on an eternal journey of evolution through experience, through the endless dimensions of infinity. And there is nothing to be frightened of. And if we step out of fear, this whole house of cards crumbles. Because if you look at it, first of all, you've got the key fear at the foot of this pyramid they've created, which is the masses living their lives in fear of what other people think of them, therefore conforming to whatever the norm is. And the higher you go up this pyramid, you get more and more material rewards, but the price for not doing exactly as demanded gets higher and higher and higher. And right up to the top of the pyramid, they are in fear. And it's a pyramid of fear. And that's the energy, the thought form that holds it together. You step out of fear, you step out of control. And so to do that, we need to do two things. First of all, we need to step out of our own fear and a fear of what other people think of us, and start living our truth and saying what we think, right. Therefore ceasing to be a sheep. But absolutely as important, stop dictating to everyone else what they should and should not believe. And at that point, we cease to be the police force of the sheep, and this is in trouble. If we're going to be free, we've got to set ourselves free and allow other people to be free. Otherwise, this whole control will go on.
Well, I could illustrate how feeble they are with an experience in my life in London with Lloyd's of London. Maybe I can tell you a bit about that after the break.
Okay, we're back. Judd, real quickly, because we have another caller we have to get to.
I was living in London in the late 70s, early 80s, and I was producing films, commercial films, features, and through connections of my father-in-law then, who's a lawyer in London, I met people at Lloyd's of London who volunteered to finance film projects for me. And I did that. And in the second film project, because they were found to be investing in my film project, an investigation began of Lloyd's of London for the first time in the history of that organization. And before that investigation ended, several underwriters went on the run. Two I know that I was working with got away with nearly 250 million pounds. And Sir Peter Green, right down, all resigned. And as you remember, in the early 80s, Lloyd's of London got in big trouble. And it was all because of this film I'd made, not knowing. I thought they were wonderful people, willing to finance my work. But they were doing it in an offshore scheme in Gibraltar, and it got discovered because I was naive, and when reporters would ask me, I'd say, my finances are at Lloyd's of London. Well, that precipitated a huge problem in my life because they made a heavy move on me, and because I retaliated and I was innocent, they threw it out of the courts in England. And Lloyd's of London is not the same, but that was where I first began to realize that I had tapped inadvertently into this system we're talking about, which is Freemasonry meets Zionism. Okay? There is a direct link between the two. And most people see Freemasonry as ultra-right Christianity. Zionism as ultra-right Judaism.
Okay, let me ask David to bring that into focus. Judd, we've got one more call I want to get to, and a fascinating story. Call us again with that. That's most amazing.
Because I've never talked about it over the years, but I think it's time to kind of...
Yeah. That's quite a story. All right, David, how about that?
I'll get back to you and keep up the work, David.
Thanks, mate.
There's an army out here waiting for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good luck.
I think what Judd talks about there is how these different secret societies fit together, and we again to this pyramid situation. And if people just think of Russian dolls, one inside the other, inside the other, inside the other, this structure is pyramids within pyramids. So a secret society is a pyramid, very obviously, and it's a compartmentalized pyramid. You only get into the upper levels of initiation if you're considered the right person from their point of view to give you the information.
And those in the lower levels have little knowledge of what's going on upstairs. It's very much separated.
Just walking across the room here, because I've come across this quote which sums it up really. If you take the Freemasons, which are basically the Knights Templar under another name, and the Knights Templar were this force under another name, and so it goes on. We're looking at the same same face with different masks on, and the vast majority of Freemasons in the world are on the bottom 3 levels of degree, the so-called blue degrees. They haven't got a clue, overwhelmingly, what the Freemason organization is really about at the peak of the pyramid. And an infamous American Freemason with a statue in Washington, D.C. called Albert Pike, who was one of the people responsible for setting up the Ku Klux Klan, he wrote in a book called Morals and Dogma, page 819, the following about the blue degrees, where the vast majority of Freemasons are in the world. He said, the blue degrees are but the outer court or portico of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them. So basically, we've got classic compartmentalization. And I came across in my travels in Australia a book which a friend of mine found in a second-hand bookshop, which was a Freemasonic book written for Freemasons of obviously some high degree. And it was talking in there of the 64th and 75th degree of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Oh. They only publicly accept 33.
That's right.
And so what happens, it seems, is that there are 2 33rd degree levels. There's the people that get to the 33rd degree, and the hierarchy that run the big picture say, well, that's as far as they're going, because they're not of the right caliber to go into the next one. And then there's the people who go into the 33rd degree who realize that that's the bottom level of the next pyramid. And so they then go out of the 33rd degree into the higher pyramids, into the Illuminati levels and what have you. So, but the point I'm making here is that it's pyramids within pyramids. So the Freemasons are a compartmentalized pyramid, but they go into the global secret society network pyramid, the next one up. And at the peak of that, the Skull and Bones Society in America, the Freemasons, the Knights of Malta, the Rosicrucians, all these secret societies which appear to be different and unconnected, they fuse into the same peak, and they're all operating to the same agenda. Interestingly, the Skull and Bones Society, this blood-drinking satanic operation out of Yale University, of which George Bush is the most famous member, where the initiation involves coffins and skulls and stuff. Where did the Skull and Bones Society come from? What was the flag that the Templars used to fly on their ships at various times, which became known as the pirate flag? It was the Skull and Bones. So here again, the Skull and Bones at Yale University, which provides many of the elite in the American administrations, is another Templar front.
All right, David Icke, again, laying out some remarkable information for you to consider here at Sightings on the Radio. Back in a couple of minutes with another phone call and then the wrap-up of tonight's show. All right, we are back, and Judd is back on the line from Spokane, listening in on KSPN. Judd, you got about 15 seconds. Go ahead.
Just relevant to what Dave was saying, from my studies, every president of the United States except John F. Kennedy was a 33rd degree Mason. And it's
that's
a story.
Yeah, we've done that before on this program too, and not only 33rd degree Masons, but members of lots of organizations in common. Thank you, Judd, very much. David, quick comment, very quick.
Yeah, that's a classic example. As you quite rightly say, Jeff, other organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, also you find involved with the heads of the Joint Chiefs of Staff like Colin Powell. You find presidents, you find the Secretary of States like Madeleine Albright, the present one, and a stream of her predecessors. These people are members of these organizations which interlock in this pyramid spider's web, however you like to symbolize it, with the classic global secret societies, and it's a massive web which is controlled from the center, the spider in the center of the web. And I say the spider in the center of the web and the hierarchy that is above all other hierarchies in this web, as my research has gone in the last year, is definitely what we call satanic, Satanism. By that, I don't mean, the devil and all that stuff. I mean what we call Satanism, the abuse of knowledge, the ritual abuse of knowledge, and the knowledge of how you can create malevolent energy fields and magnetic fields, and how you can affect people's thinking as a result. That's definitely the hierarchy that overrides all other hierarchies in all this.
Let's go back and talk now to Bonnie, who's been holding on, calling in from Clear Lake, listening in on Web TV. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, Jeff. What a great guest. He can really see real clearly. He sees really what's going on. I was calling in, and I didn't really hear the end of what he's talking about Diana. But I wanted to mention, next time you get David John Oates on, having played the Queen, I do not believe Diana is dead. I think they banished her to that castle, and that's what the big spiel was by her brother, saying they're going to stay with me. They're really going to be staying with their mother over at his house. I think Diana didn't die. The hit was on Dodi and the Arabs.
Well, there's a lot of speculation about that. It's something that will probably rattle around for forever in terms of conspiracy theory and so forth.
Well, I think David said she wasn't dead either, didn't he?
No. He said it was a definite operation, that no one he has talked to has disagreed with that theory, that she may not have died in the wreck, and the prevailing wisdom, according to his research, is that she might have survived it.
If you look at those boys, it's like they were playing an act, Jeff, not like they'd really lost their mother.
Well,
they were all impish and giggly.
It's real tough to understand this from a human perspective sometimes. We're running out of time, Bonnie. Thanks very much for calling. David, we have just about a minute or so we might want to try and wrap it up here. Let me give the 800 number. I've been remiss in that tonight. His book is And the Truth Shall Set You Free. Very, very informative, controversial, provocative book full of all of what we've talked about tonight and much more. 1-800-321-9054. 1-800-321-9054. David Icke's book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free. David, just about 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I'm talking all around America in the next 3 weeks. I'm in Austin on Saturday at the Whole Life Expo, in Chicago. I'm also talking in my own events in Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and San Rafael, and I'm at Phoenix, and that same number will give people details where they can hear me. But
excellent.
I just feel very optimistic, Jeff, having continued my travels around the world. People are waking up, and
all right, well, we'll
3 or 4
continue.
years' time, it's going to be a very different scene, I think.
I think you're right. We'll continue this discussion at a point not too far down the road. Thank you again, David.
Jeff.
Great to talk to you.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Thank you. Good night. And thanks to all of you for spending your evening with me. I'll be back tomorrow night, Friday night, another program here at Sightings on the Radio. Until then, good night, and as always, good luck.